Well, Donna, welcome back. We're live, and it's lovely to see you again.
Lovely to see you as well.
Yeah. So, welcome everybody. If you've tuned in, or if you're watching afterwards as part of our podcast series, then we're really pleased that you're joining us. Believe it or not, Donna, we've done 10 of these now. So,
Wow.
we're going to keep going on this. I think I was reflecting on should we sort of have a season 2? And I thought, no, we'll carry on doing season 1 for as long as season 1 lasts, and then we can try and do, maybe we'll do something else.
You know what it makes me think of, which is totally off topic, but what it makes me think of is that when I did run before COVID, I could always get to 10 miles. Really, that was my that was my run. The last 3 miles was always my motion of I have to believe in myself that I can get those. It didn't matter how many times I had ran a half marathon. The last 3 miles were always so I wonder, just the first thing that pops in my head. So I'm looking forward to the next 3, and maybe we'll do our stories on the 13 miles.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to the next 10.
Excellent. Me too. But that will be our second half marathon.
Absolutely. So today we've chosen a subject to talk about ambiguity. This probably isn't a new topic for people. We've been dealing with ambiguity for a long time. But we've used the word wrestle in there deliberately, I think, to represent a kind of coming to terms with, or a form of struggle, or some kind of challenge around ambiguity. So we can work through these words maybe, and then have a think about it. Because what do you think, Donna? Do you think there's the same as that? Do you think there's more ambiguity, or do you think it's the same, or what's changing?
I think it always exists. I don't think it's something new today. I think it's something that's always been there. And I think we wrestle with ambiguity when there's great opportunities that are definitely positive things. And we wrestle with ambiguity when we've labeled them as negative or positive. So it doesn't live in that context of this is associated with something that is negative or positive. It's just a way of being, as you would like to say. It's a way of being on the way that we see things.
Yeah. No, I really like that, because wrestling doesn't imply that it's a bad thing either. Yeah, it's maybe it's that inner kind of discussion that we have with ourselves as we kind of move into ambiguity. So what we thought we would do is break it up, like we have done, into 3 different sections. And the first one is about external ambiguity, what we might also call the outer world. So it's how we might experience ambiguity. There's a lot of that these days. There's a lot of discussion I hear about social media being kind of out there. There's the people out there. There's our friends out there. There's our work and out there. All sorts of things in the outside world that are giving us opportunities, maybe giving us kind of what might not feel like opportunities. Where does that take you, Donna, when you think about the external ambiguity of the world?
I think I think the external ambiguity is potentially even the way that we look at it based on our values. From the research that's out there and the research I've done, often our ambiguity with we're going to be moving to the internal, but that difference between the internal and external, it has to often do with maybe, is there something out of alignment? So out of alignment from a values perspective, or is there something out of alignment in where you want to go that maybe is different than what you've been taught that you should have or should want?
Yeah.
And that word ambiguity for me is often tied to the values we hold,
Right.
And it's not something that's fixed with money.
Yeah.
People will often say, well, I can fix it because, this or that, but the ambiguity can still exist even if there is the opportunity even if there's an opportunity attached to being able to financially afford something. And that's what people don't always connect with, I believe.
Yeah, you're reminding me of myself a bit, and also some friends, where we stepped off of, long-term jobs that we may have had, and there is an element potentially of money associated with that, but in reality there isn't. It's about stepping off into an ambiguous situation, and the sorts of emotions and feelings that can come up are excitement, maybe a bit of anxiety, maybe. I love the word opportunity that comes to mind. There's a sort of liberating feeling that goes with it if you can get yourself into the mindset. And we often talk about curiosity as a mindset to work with, and I think that can be really helpful if you start your sentences with "I wonder what will happen," and kind of believe it as well. Then you possibly you're more open to opportunities when you do enter into an externally ambiguous situation or an externally ambiguous.
But what makes it? I mean, there's definitely some big things going on in the world, that there always will be big things going on that they're out there. Those are like far out there, right? But the ambiguity in our external world around us, does it come from that concept of needing to be able to control and understand things, when in reality, if someone is sharing experiences, I'm going on a trip next week and people are sharing their experiences or things that they have learned from research, but it doesn't mean that that person at that time in that space is going to be there when we're there. So the outer world is ambiguous because of research we're doing, but I haven't yet been in that space, nor have I had the opportunity to interact with those people. So is it the need for me to control and think I can understand everything, when in reality, it doesn't matter how much research I do, I'm only going to be able to understand a certain percentage of it, because I'm actually not living it. I'm not living in that outer world. I'm only thinking about the outer world.
Yeah, like walking into a room of people that you don't know. That's ambiguous. And this idea
and my
of control,
preconceived notions of it, right? My what I perceive or what I've been told by others. I mean, that happens
that kind of goes back to the values thing, doesn't it? You're kind of how am I turning up in this situation that's ambiguous with my own belief system? What makes it ambiguous to me might not make it ambiguous to another person.
Right.
So we're talking about the world out there. In essence, what I think we mean is everything outside of us.
Right.
And maybe what we should do then is have a look at the next one. We just talk around it. So let's have a talk about internal ambiguity, our inner world, and what might that mean.
I think a lot of it. A lot of it is when we're out of. People talk about being authentic. People use other words about, like, I don't believe, like, imposter syndrome. It's the idea of actually living. When people are actually able to connect to their values and live their values, then the space of ambiguity, maybe it never goes away, but we reduce it, right? So what allows me to sit in this position on this team that I'm holding now? It's not about, it's about thinking about what I have done in the past. So being able to understand my strengths. It's about being able to understand maybe some of my shortfalls so I can build a team around me. So I'm reducing the ambiguity. I'm creating a space where it's more comfortable for me to be me, my authentic self, and know that I deserve a spot at that table and that project. And then kind of working our way through and just really considering and reflecting on, like, what am I doing well? And always, what could I improve? Like, where could I be more curious? And what beliefs do I hold that are limiting my ability to actually show up? What beliefs do I hold that limit my ability to show up?
I wonder as well if another way of looking at it, which isn't a different way of looking at it, I think I'm just considering what you're saying, is sometimes you might think, I wonder why I feel like this. Or I wonder why, I find myself in this situation again. I set myself an intention to do something differently, and here I am again. I've just done exactly the same thing, and this concept of wondering about ourselves and becoming more aware of ourselves, and in many ways the wonderful ambiguity that we are. I think we're a mystery. That's why I love doing this work so much. You know what I mean? We're mysterious creatures. We are ambiguous. We do things suddenly that we weren't expecting. So, what does that bring up for you, Donna? Just smiling. I love the smiling.
Yeah, that's my yes. I love to smile too, actually, and it's an important part of me actually showing up. And it's not, it's one of those ambiguous things that sometimes it's received well and sometimes it's not. It's in different business, in different situations. I sometimes, when I find myself doing behaviors that I'm like, I'm trying not to do that anymore, that's not how I want to show up, I say to myself, how long has it been since it showed up? And it's like, wow, it's been a couple of years. And I try and give myself some grace and empathy that, like, why did it happen today? What is it that's been going on? What's been that rumble inside of me? What's been that ambiguity? What's been that space that I'm actually not living into my true values that's caused that to occur today? And I try and understand that, you know, we do have these natural paths. And sometimes when we're in a space where we just feel something for some reason, sometimes those behaviors, and I'm going to associate them with ones that are not great, they're not the best behaviors. That ability for us to sort of look at it and say to ourselves, it hasn't happened in a while. Why has it happened? And now that I'm aware of it, what is it that I can do? And what can I intentionally choose to do? And again, what can I intentionally need to be adding back into my life, into the process of my life, or into the process of this project, so that I can do my best to limit that. I don't know if it ever goes away. And I think sometimes that's the hard part when we rock the boat a bit. But if we can really realize, like, it's been a decade since I've done something like that. Like, it's been a long time. Like how come? Like, what's going on? What's that unknown space? Where do I need to be more curious? Where do I need to be more wonderlust, right? What is it that I could actually do?
So there's a something that you mentioned earlier was this, I don't think you used the word congruence, but it was this alignment was the word that you used, you know. So this idea, I think that you were saying, of when the external environment and our inner environment are more in balance with each other, then we seem to be able to be more in the moment and be more in the flow of things. Also to be more you know, comfortable maybe with the ambiguousness of certain situations or the certainty of situations. So it's when we feel connected with who we are, and who we are is connecting with the way that we the world outside is also presenting itself to us. That feels important. It feels as if there's something important in that, knowing full well that you can't control the outside world, but you have more, potentially at least, more control over yourself and your inner world. So is it that that's where we should be working more rather than on the outside world?
I would think so. I think when it comes to ambiguity, it's that space of exploring ourselves, understanding why we're not making a decision. And I know people will often say, well, I don't have the time or money, but from the research I've done, those are not the deciding factors in any one of the people I've interviewed. It was probably actually the opposite in many of the cases. There was plentifulness of both of those. So, and I know for some people, they go, that's not really true. And I'm like, it's a dynamic space, just that we ask you to consider if that's really what's holding us back, or once again, if that is part of that beliefs you bring to the table, right? That maybe needs a belief you bring to the table, that is it true or not? But the ability for us to really stop and ask ourselves, like, what is it that's actually causing it? And why potentially am I uncomfortable to be actually making a choice to move out of ambiguity? Why do I want to sit in it? And not making a decision doesn't, you know, not having an answer doesn't always mean it's ambiguous if you have sort of let it go. But ambiguity sometimes from an uncomfortable spot can come from when you can't stop thinking about something. It's top of mind. You know, you sit down with 5 different people and you're talking about the same thing. It's that type of space of ambiguity. If you have decided to let something sit and you're going to think about it at the end of the month, you're going to think about it after you're done that project, it can be ambiguous, but it can be a different type of ambiguous because you are definitely very intentional about it.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Yeah.
I'm feeling your brain is percolating.
Oh,
Good cup of coffee,
yeah,
like a
definitely.
good cup of coffee.
Yeah. What you've done is you've taken me back to the question. I was looking at that, when leaders wrestle with ambiguity, and we just for those people listening, we don't rehearse any of this. We are very much in the live stream, which is why we're calling this a live stream series. So, I'm wondering now, when we've written when leaders wrestle with ambiguity, what we really meant, because when I listened to what you were saying, the idea that it's so you can be intentional as well doesn't sort of line up with wrestling. Intentional is more being having a sense of direction, being focused maybe on what we're talking about here, and being focused on ambiguity and recognizing that maybe it's okay, that maybe there isn't ambiguity, maybe it's just the way you're seeing the world. I'm not sure.
But could it also be, many people will have, like, they've got suggestions of different projects or different themes or different things that they just chose to work on and plan. So when you kind of get to that month, for example, and you open that door of those are the topics, you're almost wrestling with the ambiguity, but maybe you've put it into spaces so that, as we would say, your prefrontal cortex is actually able to be as focused as possible. And you're allowing yourself to actually do some really good thinking. When we have 20 topics on a table and we're trying to get people to work their way through them, it can be very exhausting because they're like, I don't know, there's just so much. But if you sort of take it and chunk it down and work your way through it and create some structure, so we're being intentional about the way we wrestle with ambiguity. Because whenever we put a new topic on the table that's questioning the way we do something as a business, the way we question the way we do our roles, the questioning the way we choose to show up in the world, that is where people start talking about this being authentic and imposter syndrome. But sometimes what I learned, I remember when I moved to Ottawa, out of university, it was a really interesting thing about moving from, what people saw versus maybe, the opportunity that came with a role, And for me, the ambiguity was with that external world. They expected that I would want to still do certain things, which I enjoyed. I still enjoyed them, but I also enjoyed this stuff over here as well. And so for people, sometimes that wrestling with ambiguity as a theme is wrestling with it to understand that we have to start to really see ourselves differently.
Right. The other thing that's brought into my mind as well, when we're talking about the external world, this idea of ambiguity, I'll just pop it up there in the external world. That word expectation has also come into my mind, that sometimes there can be huge expectation. If there are 300 projects that have appeared on, and somehow you're having to find your way through them. You've got your own kind of desires maybe, but then you have the expectations. In a leadership position, sometimes people are looking to you to resolve it and make the decision and solve the problem, but they're not always, it's not always easy, because what goes on inside you is, if we do that, I'm going to let that person down. If we do that, I'm going to let that person down. If we do that, is that really what I want to do? Is that what I'm excited about? So there's sorry, go on.
No. So, I mean, I know we're both very people-centric. So for us, that is a space of how we would look at that situation. But for others who might be listening, they might say, if there's that many things to do, you just figure them out, you delegate them, you do them. There's another way of being out there. And so that concept you said about being curious and having a belief that the team or the individuals at that table can actually figure it out is an interesting thing. And so even that dynamics of, like, when we are people, we're both people-centric individuals. We have that lens when we look at those types of 300 projects, but just giving permission to people here to say, no, I look at that differently, and I go, yeah, that's right. And that's where sometimes that ambiguity and that wrestling kind of comes between ourselves and then also with our teams.
Yeah. So my mind is also turning to the final question that we had, because we've been jumping backwards and forwards, which is lovely, about this, where do we find reassurance? And I think I put the word reassurance there. Maybe it's not the right word, I don't know. But it's in a way, what I think the question is, how do I find some peace? I'm going to use the word peace, to lean into ambiguous situations, whether they're inside or outside or somewhere in between. What do we do? Where do we find it?
I think one of the things is that dynamics is that understanding that as you sort of work through these things, you create new pathways of thinking, you create new ways that you want to show up in the way you want to be. Not everybody is going, as we've heard this before, not everyone's going to get excited about that for you. And part of this journey that we do through life is to say that's okay. They either, that's okay. It's not that we're leaving, not talking about leaving people behind. That's a different conversation, but it's about understanding that where is it that you like to go? What is it that you need so that you can kind of have peace, or you can zipper something up and move on, right? What is it that you need? And just that understanding and being really cognizant of, like, we can try and get people's support. And if we keep fighting for it and trying to search for it and we never get it, does that always keep us in that space of ambiguity? Is that one of the things that's not allowing us to find that peace? Because maybe we have it, except for like a small little chunk, and we're giving it a lot of power, a lot of influence.
I'm reflecting now as you're talking that I quite like the word peace. It kind of implies a sort of accepting, and it's not to say that you're accepting the right or wrongness of something, but it's a kind of an inner type of acceptance. And and when you're resisting things, maybe the opposite of that, when you're not accepting things and you're resisting things, is it keeping you in a different kind of energy? So if it's not peaceful, what is it? Is it, I don't know, is ambiguous the opposite of peacefulness? Probably not, but there's something.
No, it's the opposite.
Yeah, I don't think it is, but
but one of the things to think about reassurance is that space of being committed. So, being intentional. There's certain areas of my life I'm very intentional. There's other areas that I'm not. I let things evolve. But thinking about intentionally, how am I choosing? How do I want to show up? What type of activities am I doing? That I believe, because I've actually thought about it. I've not just said this is the only way to do it. I've actually been curious, is there other ways? So based on where I'm at and who I am, this is going to allow me over the next number of years to get to where I want to go. And our activities and actions, if we think about them sort of long-term, and then think about today, what do I need to be doing to actually get there? It's a very dynamic way of sort of stepping into it. And instead of wrestling, kind of having a plan, and then knowing when you need to wrestle with them, maybe when things become a little like something happens that's created some upheaval, and then you sort of say, no, I have ways of doing this. I know how to get back on track. I know how to step into my values of who I am and how I want to show up. And that will allow me then to kind of get back on track.
Right. And that sounds like a kind of very intentional decision to be true to who you are.
Yes.
So if you get that right, and it's a lifelong journey, by the way, because who you are is sort of one of those things that emerges as you kind of go along. But
and you have to be okay with that, right? That's the thing. That's part of this ambiguity. Is people are like, well, that's not who I am. I'm like, okay, well, that might not have been you 5 years ago, but these opportunities you've experienced, or these challenges you've experienced, you are no longer that same person. So what labels do we just need to like sticky off of us, right? And what labels do we want to add or not add any at all? Maybe we just want to remove labels, because we are the ambiguity comes from from whatever. Maybe there's labels we just need to take away from ourselves.
Yeah, it feels like so it feels in a way that the reassurance may come from removing the pressure on yourself to maybe please others or meet expectations that you don't really believe in, because then you're leaning in and reaching out to the expectations that you do believe in, and that in a way can propel you from where you are in any moment into a much better space, because you're actually doing the right thing by yourself You know, that doesn't mean to say that you're doing the wrong thing by others. I'm not saying it's a right and wrong in that sense, but it's guiding yourself through understanding who you are and what is right for you, that you move into the correct path. And that can be a significant, reassurance when you feel, yeah, I know, now I know where I am.
Right. So can I just throw can I add just something to that?
Yeah, of course you can.
So one of the things that I do enjoy about this topic is we often think it's about moving forward. That's how we often think about, people that are resilient or ambiguous, this space. One of the things that really interests me is, what if somebody makes a conscious choice that no movement is needed? They're actually in the right spot. So we always think about people wanting to move forward. I'm like, but what if our ambiguous situation is that we're actually able to understand right now where I am is the best place for me. So there's no movement forward. There's a different acceptance of where we are, because it's definitely something we talk about. We talk about, we have to move forward. We have to jump forward or bounce back. And I'm like, I don't know why I'd want to bounce back to anything that I've left. It's a whole other conversation, another podcast for another day.
Yeah, probably.
But just want to let people know that the ambiguity, wrestling with it could mean actually identifying it and just staying exactly where you are, because you have a different acceptance of the situation. Or it could be moving forward, or it could be, chess pieces go in all sorts of different directions, right? So I'd like us to think about that concept. Maybe it's to the side, maybe it's in a diagonal. It's just an interesting, we might go back. It's an interesting space of the choices we make about ambiguity. And I think sometimes that brain mindset of moving forward is actually part of the ambiguity as well, because maybe someone actually wants to go back. It won't be the first person that's taken a promotion at work and decided that this is not for me for many reasons. And they take their piece, right? Their chess piece, and they decide to move their queen back, right? Not forward. And how do we wrestle with ambiguity from the outside world and inner world in those spaces?
You're reminding me of an old friend of mine who climbed Mount Everest. And he did, in the end, manage to climb Mount Everest. I think he had the summit to himself for about 20 minutes. But he talks about how, in order to get there, you have to acclimatize, and you have to go up, and you have to get used to the air. And if you don't get used to the air, then you have to come back down again, And he did it many times before, in the end, he, decided that he was going to go for it. And so maybe that's a conversation for another day as well.
Yeah, but right. We do want people just to realize that there is no one way or right way, and people will say this is what you should do. And the research really shows there's different ways, and some people will use multiple approaches or singular approaches. But that's what's important to you and where you are at this time. Not what was important to you 10 years ago or 3 years ago, but today, who you are, where you are, what's important to you. We really appreciate you joining us today for the live stream. You can find Lee and I, Lee Norris and Donna Adamanchuk, at changeinnovators.com. And as always, we're very happy that you joined us. Any final thoughts, Lee?
Just to say, if you haven't had an opportunity to yet, all of our live streams are on our new YouTube LiveStream Series. So you can go back and watch those. This one will be there really soon. And if you like them, please like them and share them, because that's going to help us with our story.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Enjoy your day.
Yeah. Goodbye, everybody.